Hello and welcome back to the Goldenseal Podcast. This is our first episode of the podcast following our 50th anniversary episodes. This episode may sound a little different from our past episodes, but it's similar in ways too. As we continue to digitize our collection of oral histories here at Goldenseal, I will be sharing clips of the audio. That may be just conversations or someone sharing songs or tunes. Goldenseal has always been closely involved with the Vandalia Gathering, which takes place at the Capitol Complex each Memorial Day weekend. We are lucky to be able to also work closely with the West Virginia State Archives to pair up some of the audio from previous Vandalias, and in doing so, share not only the stories, but the music of our great state. West Virginia has a wealth of musicians, artists, and storytellers, and it has always been a goal of Goldenseal to preserve and honor these stories by sharing them with others. In this episode, we will be featuring clips from our recording archives as well as a few clips from our current issue of Goldenseal Magazine. You'll hear from Ginny Hawker, the 2024 Vandalia Award Recipient, which is our state's highest folklife honor. Ginny shares a bit about her life and her love of primitive Baptist singing. We'll also feature clips from a 1976 interview with Alan Jabbour of the American Folklife Center, as well as clips from a 2009 interview with fiddler Elmer Rich, who was 90 years old at the time of the interview. We'll also share clips from a 2011 interview with Buddy Griffin, who sadly passed away on February 4th of this year. These featured recordings come from our archives here at Goldenseal and relate to articles that were featured in our magazine. Listeners can learn more about Mr. Jabbour's interview in our fall 1977 issue, Elmer Rich in our fall of 2009 issue, and Buddy Griffin in our fall 2011 issue. You can read more about Ginny Hawker in our current spring 2025 issue. Goldenseal does offer free scans of individual articles that folks may be interested in. If you give us a call at 304-558-0220 or email us at chgoldenseal@wv.gov. Ginny Hawker hails from the Danville, Virginia area and grew up on the Eastern Shore before settling in West Virginia in the late 70s. She found her home in Gilmer County with the West Virginia State Folk Festival and the Augusta Heritage Center in Elkins, West Virginia, where she resides today. In 2024, she was awarded our state's highest folklife honor, the Vandalia Award, for her efforts to preserve and promote the traditional music of Appalachia and her vocal stylings and teachings learned through the primitive Baptist singing she was raised with. She has taught workshops across the country and world, sharing her voice and knowledge with many.
Of my Lord, I hope to live and labor and be obedient to my God until my dying hour. I love to see the lilies grow and view them all standing. That was my childhood, was growing up on the Eastern Shore, just inland from Chincoteague Island, from 6 to 18. And when I went to college, that was where I lived, but you never quite belonged, because that's tight waterman culture over there. Of course, when you moved away from the Danville, Virginia area, there weren't any primitive Baptist churches over on the Eastern Shore. When I was 6, he moved us over there for his work, and but every chance we got, it was back over to Grandpa's house, and summers at Grandpa's house. So Christmas, Thanksgiving, everything was at Grandpa's house. So you just cross the Chesapeake Bay and ride the ferry, which was not fun. But that was, it's like there are other churches. There are pivotal things that happen, and that church is the pivotal one. For Daddy and for me. Just the way things went at the church, how people were with each other. No one was yelling. No one was shaming anybody, or, the only thing I asked Grandpa one time, first of all, how do you know when somebody wants to join? And he said, it's usually the fellow in the back that's squirming a lot. And, but nobody asked anybody else to join. He said, no one should ever presume to speak to the spiritual life of another. So he never asked us to go to church with him. We figured that's where he was going, and so, Daddy went, and me, I wanted to tag because I wanted to hear that singing, because it was so different. It was like, almost puts you in a trance or something, And when you're a little kid, you're 7 or 8 years old, it's just so different, from anything you've heard. And, no musical instruments in there, just these people singing this slow rolling stuff, and so much from the heart. You could tell it was part of the worship. And they weren't singing it to perform it. There was no choir. There wasn't anybody leading. Somebody would just say, 365, please. And somebody would start off. I don't know how they ever got their pitch, but they just did, but you sang in no harmony, so you sang in whatever register you could get in. But when they move along so slow like that, and you kind of hear harmonics, it's really weird how you don't miss the harmony. And I love harmony singing. Oh, I love it. And so did Daddy. When he would teach Carolyn, my sister, and me, who was 2 years younger than me, we would be in the back seat of the car, and Daddy's driving, and Mother was holding the book, so with the words. And so, we were singing Methodist hymns then, and the only thing he knew to tell us was that he would say, Carolyn, sing a little higher. So I don't know how Carolyn and I knew what sing a little higher was, or sing a little. Okay, you're too far apart. Sing a little closer, So that was kind of the way we learned. So still try to do that sometimes when I'm teaching harmony singing. I was living and working in Westminster, Maryland. So we started going to festivals, and mostly bluegrass festivals, and then we came to the folk festival in Glenville. And I thought, whoa, wait a minute. This is different. Glenville was different. It was not, Watermelon Park and all these big crowds, but there were people there that I didn't even know people lived like that anymore. This was in 1977, something like that. Yeah, 76 or 77. And, just the whole lifestyle thing was so evident on the street. And not just the music, but all parts of it, People were making apple butter. People were, these were things that my aunts and uncles did, but I thought was gone. People don't live like that anymore.
Right.
And I watched the square dancing and just, the welcoming they had for me, and I'm not going back. I definitely had found my place.
Yeah.
Particularly with the folk festival. And so I just stayed, and I wanted to be part of that folk festival. So I came to every meeting for 2 or 3 years, I think, without opening my mouth, just listening to what was going on. I started to sing at the festival a little bit on the street and at the jams, and one old fella came up and said, "Girlie, the fiddlers come from Clay County here, and the dancers come from Braxton County. But you moved to the right place because the singers come from Gilmer County." And I don't remember who that old fella was, but I just thought that was so neat. I must have landed in the right place. My kids loved it, and They would come out every summers and spend summers, Everybody loved it. A lot of hippie culture then, as you know, in the state. That was fine with me. And but I don't know. I just liked the way music in Gilmer County and that folk festival wasn't something you worked toward and practiced and to perform. It was just an integral part of life. While we sing this song of love, our hearts are deeply wounded. Perhaps we all may meet no more here in a congregation.
This interview with Alan Jabbour, the founding director of the American Folklife Center, was featured early on in our magazine's history in fall of 1977. Alan talks of his time collecting folk songs in West Virginia, and particularly his time with fiddler Henry Reed of Monroe County.
I got interested in, I played the violin all my life, of course, as you know, and played in orchestras and the like. Paid my way through college, playing in orchestras and teaching lessons and doing things like that. I was in music heavy enough and early enough that I had decided, well, I didn't want to make a living that way, and I'd study something else in college. So I studied English and went on to graduate school at Duke University in Durham, North Carolina, studying English literature and things like that. But Tom, it sometimes happens that you push down something in one place and it pops up in another, and I think it wasn't all that long after I stopped playing music and stopped working professionally at it, playing classical music, that I found myself unaccountably getting interested in old-time fiddling. And I had heard some music here and there. I had actually heard that sort of music all my life. Let's see, I came to Durham in 1963, and it was that year or the following year that I started up going out to visit old-time fiddlers. And then that first year at Duke, it really took over. And nothing would do but I must go out and pack my fiddle shyly in the trunk and also rustle up a modest tape recorder and visit some local old-time fiddlers. And I started out right there in Durham County, North Carolina. And then I gradually sort of worked my way westward. On weekends, I would take off. The more I did it, the more interested I got. At some point here, I went to an old-time fiddlers convention too. One early one that I certainly remember was Pulaski, Virginia. And I remember going there, and I bumped into a number of people. One person I bumped into and got acquainted with then was Franklin George, who's a West Virginian. And we got friendly, and by then I was trying to relearn the fiddle in the style that I was hearing people play. And then I believe it was at a Galax convention around 1964, summer of 64 maybe. I met Oscar Wright from Princeton. And I can't remember who introduced me to him or what, but he played some nice old fiddle tunes, and I was really excited by them. I thought they were beautiful, and I liked Oscar. I admired his sensitivity and the real devotion and high honor that he bestowed upon these tunes that he played. And so I thought, I'll go visit Oscar Wright. And not too long after, I can't remember exactly when, but this would have been around 64 or maybe early 65, I took a trip up into West Virginia, and I went and visited Oscar Wright at his home. I recorded him, and by then I was playing a good deal, so I played some with him. And he started telling me about who it was he learned a lot of tunes from, directly or indirectly. And he was talking about this man, Henry Reed, that he learned this tune and that tune from. And I said, well, I knew Oscar then was a fairly old man. So I pictured this Henry Reed must be somebody who by now is dead. And I said, well, did he die, or is he still alive, or what? And he says, oh, no, he's still alive. He lives down in Glenlyn, Virginia, which is right on the West Virginia border. And on that same trip, I stopped in to visit Henry Reed. Karen, my wife Karen, was with me. We stopped in to visit the Reeds, and he welcomed me, and we talked a good while. I believe we may have had supper with him. And then he got out his fiddle, and he played that night about 40 tunes. He just played them straight off, one after another. He'd talk about them a little, and I was just awed and thunderstruck by this musician. And I'd never heard anybody play so many tunes that I'd never heard or heard of before, one after another. Beautiful, exciting style. He was old and had a little bit of a palsy in his hand, which made his style a little scratchier, but he was still doing all the same things, and any musician could hear right through all the surface. It was exciting. Well, I was in seventh heaven, and I had found my master then. And after that, I started going up to visit Henry Reed every chance I could get on the weekends. I'd sneak up there and spend a day with him and drive up and drive back again. It was really a turning point in my life, being with Henry Reed, recording him, trading tunes with him, not trading, but learning from him. And he took it that way too. Though we never talked much about it, it was clear that he thought about me and thought about my learning tunes from him, because I would go back after, say, a month that I wasn't up there to see him, and we'd chat and walk around a little bit, and after a while we'd get out the fiddles, and he started playing, and maybe the first 10 pieces he played for me would be all tunes he had never played for me before. He never said a word about it, but I knew and he knew that I was anxious to learn tunes, and he was thinking of tunes in that interim while I was away. He must have said to himself, I haven't played that tune for Alan Jabbour. I'll have to remember to play it when he gets back.
Fiddler Elmer Rich was featured in our fall 2009 issue in an article authored by Mark Crabtree with a sidebar by Mike Seeger. We also recorded a performance of his at the 2009 Vandalia Gathering, where he tells some stories and plays a few tunes. To read more about the life of Elmer Rich, give us a call or send us an email. We'd be happy to share a copy of the article. Elmer Rich performed for the First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt in 1936 at Arthurdale. We're lucky enough to have a bit of that audio to feature here from a newsreel and audio recorded by Charles Seeger and Sidney Robertson Cowell, who recorded the event at Arthurdale for the Library of Congress. Though the recording from 1936 features Elmer playing the mandolin, he went on to become a proficient fiddle player and won many contests and awards across the state. He died at the age of 95 in 2015.
Well, hello out there, and I'd like to welcome everybody to this beautiful theater. You're really here for a great treat. You're going to get to listen to Mr. Elmer Rich. I talked to a friend of his backstage about him because Elmer was over winning a prize over at the senior fiddle contest, so he didn't get to come over until the last minute. But it turns out that Elmer's been playing the fiddle for over 75 years, and I found out just in short conversation the way he got started playing the fiddle is somebody stepped on his mandolin. Mr. Elmer Rich.
Well, it's not much for me to tell you, but it'd be all guesswork, you know. So I've been railroading for about 40 years besides playing the fiddle. So that was all good hard work in the car shop. So as far as playing, I used to play at the old farm with Dad and two brothers. And every time we get all of our work done, and all the coal come in to fix the fires of the night, then we'd sit down and play music about every evening. And we had 2 or 3 milk cows, but that was back in hard times. And we depended on the farm quite a bit. So that's about my story for so far. East Tennessee Blues, I like to play a little East C.
Played that for a long time.
Now you want to play Colored Aristarchus.
Colored
The one that-
Aristarchus.
Played at Arthurdale up there.
Yeah, tell them the story about this.
Oh, I don't know too much about. We played for a square dance, and Elmer was sitting on the stage. I had an old fiddle, and I got up to play, and every one of them strings collapsed, went down, got bang. And I said, well, they used to be walking off. I just tuned her up right there, you know. Them old wooden pegs in there, and they kept slipping. So I had to spit on them a little, tighten them up, you know. Well, after I got done playing, I come in the second place, and of course, Pap come in first, but that's the way it goes, you know. So that's about the tale of, and then she come over and planted a little red ribbon on me. That's all I got out of that, red ribbon. I lost that thing. I don't know where it is. I'm still hunting for it. I think it lost in the moving, you know.
But Elmer didn't say that Pete Seeger's father was recording that session, and it went into the Library of Congress, and so this tune is very famous because it's been recorded by lots of people, Mike Seeger and a lot of other people, Jerry Garcia. So this is a pretty famous tune that goes back to Elmer and his uncle.
Gee.
So how would you describe your fiddling? What kind of fiddler would you say you are?
I'm just between ragtime and waltz mostly.
So you like rags and waltzes?
Yeah. Some got a little rhythm on it. Well, I like good waltzes.
Mm-hmm. You use sort of have more bow than a lot of fiddlers.
Yeah.
Would you say that's true?
Yes, yeah, I figure. Well, they use putting your full bow on the waltzers a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So you gotta have, you know, if you're slow and you get, bow has to travel for it.
Mm-hmm. Where,
That's the way I figured it. But my dad, he always tried to tell me, bow straight across, but I didn't pay much attention to that anymore.
so your dad,
And to tell you how to handle the bow, get down on the end of it.
mm-hmm. So what? How was your dad? How did he bow? What was his bowing like?
It was pretty good.
Did he use the long bow? like
Yeah, he
you do?
used the longer bow, about like I do.
Mm-hmm.
But I learned a good bit off of him and his brother.
Now, did
But
they?
just by playing and how they done.
Mhm.
Of course, they try to give you a few pointers how they do or how they do it. I used to play this, what was Fisher hornpipe, and he played it, I think, in F.
Oh yeah.
And I can play it in F, but nobody likes to play it there. They like it in D,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I get to a certain point, he says, you're not getting it right. So every time we play it, it comes to the same part, said, "You're not getting it right now." I said, "Pap, I got about half." Listening to tell me that, you know. I said, "Pap," did you ever think that maybe I was getting it better than you do?
How'd he take that?
He just looked at and stared at me. He didn't say much. Yeah, he kind of wondered about that. I think he was thinking. Great thinker, you know. He studied you out pretty well. He knew where you're lying or not either.
How old were you when you said that to your dad?
Oh, I expect I was maybe 16, 17 years old.
Yeah, that's about right. Wise guy teenager.
Yeah. But you know, about the hardest thing I was trying to learn is that's what they call 6/8 time, like Irish horse when I started playing.
Jig.
Yeah, and it's got a different movement. I'd want to work my body instead of the bow. Good bit. But I'll tell you, you got to keep on if you're going to play. You got to keep at it. A lot of times, if I don't play for a while, I forget some of the tunes I can't think of, you know. We better play a waltz, maybe.
Waltz. Do you know any?
One or two, at least. Gonna play Harry's waltz.
Tell him who Harry is.
Harry was my dad, and we never knew what that tune. He never told me what it was, and I don't think anybody else did.
I don't think anybody knows.
Nobody knew it, you see, and so I'll just name it after Harry. So that's what happened. Harry's waltz.
In this 2011 interview conducted by John Lilly, Buddy Griffin shares his musical inspirations, what it was like growing up with his musically talented family, and how he ended up founding the world's first 4-year degree in traditional bluegrass music at Glenville State College. Sadly, Buddy passed away after battling a long illness this year on February 4th at the age of 76. His legacy will live on through his music and the stories he shared with friends, students, and music fans alike.
Everything I do came from them. When I was very small, they would sit on the front porch. We lived in Somersville at the time. I'd sit on the front porch and play guitars and sing Carter family songs and all the popular, you know, country, they're called country music, and all the popular country songs of the day. Bluegrass, they weren't bluegrass players at that time. And so while all of us played in the yard, they'd sit there and play. And boy, that sticks out like a, you know, like a sunlight. But mostly they played for, you know, school pie socials, ice cream socials, that kind of thing, or a square dance in town. A lot of 4-H stuff. They weren't involved in 4-H, but they were the local musicians. And it's an interesting thing. I just pulled out a newspaper ad from the Nicholas County Fair in the early 60s, and it listed their band, which by that time I was playing in it. And it said, West Virginia's #1 bluegrass and square dance band. It's called the Sunny Valley Boys at that time.
So were your siblings musical?
Everybody in the family played music. I don't, it wasn't expected. It was never forced on us. Nobody ever handed us an instrument and said, you have to play this. I think it was just, you know, something that's, you felt like you had to do. I think that was the way it was for me. And it's odd because the first instrument I played, I think it was just trying to be part of what was going on because there was always music at the house. First instrument I ever touched really was a bass fiddle. This big old bass fiddle that they had us, and if somebody was around that played it, fine. If not, it was in the corner behind the couch. So I'd stand up on the couch, and I was about maybe 5, 6, and I couldn't note it, but I could play the strings. So if they played some old fiddle tune in D, I had, you know, all 3 chords to go with it. And so I'd stand there and just play strings. And then, of course, at that point, guitar's next, you know. Yeah, the bass fiddle was a huge thing. Nobody played it. It just sat back there.
Your mom was a good bass player.
Mom was a good bass player, but she didn't start playing bass. She played guitar up until 1962, I think. But yeah, mom was a powerful bass player and good harmony singer, good guitar player. She played the old Mother Maybelle stuff and played it well. You know.
Now, what did your dad do for a living? They weren't professional musicians, were they?
No, they were that close to professional. They made enough money, you know, just playing. They never played in bars, and that probably, if they had been inclined to play in bars, the family wouldn't have turned out the way it was. Yeah, well, here's what happened. I was playing with Jim and Jesse, of course, and came here to work, and John McKinnon, who was chair, came and he said, if you were going to incorporate traditional music in the curriculum here, how would you do it? And that's a question I've been waiting to hear. I didn't realize it at the time. I've been waiting to hear that since 1965. Because when I went to that first Bluegrass Festival, and I knew other colleges were doing it, went to that first Bluegrass Festival in Fincastle, Virginia, they started talking then about a bluegrass music college and a degree, college degree in bluegrass music. And when they did that, I thought, boy, if I found a college someplace to go to, I wasn't even thinking about college at the time, but I thought, bluegrass college, I'd go to it. I'd figure out a way to get the money to go to that. And so John asked me that question, and I thought, I've got one shot. So I went straight home, and I got on the computer, which I was not very good at. Got on the computer, and I put together a proposal in one night. What I would teach, what would be important to those kids. And so we took that, developed classes, and in about a year, we had a certificate program. took us 5 years from the time we got the certificate program to get on the line with the Bachelor of Arts degree here. And Higher Education Policy Commission unanimously voted it in. So in 2007, August 3rd, we got the degree. And I've always thought, if there's any one thing that I have done in my life to get any kind of recognition for, I think that's it. And that's just a culmination of everything that I'd ever done up to that point.
Buddy performed regularly with the Max Samples Band. Featured here in a clip from the West Virginia State Archives is Buddy accompanied by Max Samples on guitar at the 1983 Vandalia Gathering playing Back Up and Push.
At Norman's request and Mac's good grace, I get to play a fiddle tune.
That concludes this episode. Thank you all for listening. And as usual, if you're interested in learning more about any of the topics we've spoke about today, you can reach out to us at our office at 304-558-0220. Ask for Goldenseal Magazine. You can learn more about the magazine or subscribe to the magazine online at wvculture.org/Goldenseal. Until next time.